Hi all, I got the indication we can start this session now. Okay, so let's talk about the learning objectives today. This workshop is going to talk about SNIA Swordfish tools. These are already developed, open source repositories are available on SNIA GitHub. So what I'm going to do today is run through each of these tools, tell you what needs to be done where, and hopefully after that, you guys are going to use that. And then where all and for whom all it will be used, we'll discuss at the end of the slideshow. So now I'll move on with the Swordfish thing. So it's an extension of DMTF Redfish. Now whereas Redfish talks about management of software defined data center, what was the need for Swordfish? So Swordfish is catering to the storage equipment and storage services basis for storage management in the data center. So these are only going to tackle the storage needs. So when I talk about that, hopefully in the SNIA sessions and in the SNIA's website, you must be aware there is a block diagram which talks about storage systems. So from the systems, we carve out storage systems and storage services. So these are where you're going to put down your things. Prior to Redfish, SMIS was a standard, but it was too complicated. There was associations and stuff. So the basis to have this Redfish and then Swordfish is to oversimplify your storage needs. So now when I move on to it, let's go to each of the tools. We'll discuss about installation and how do we go about using them. Let's start with the first tool. This is Swordfish API Emulator. Now as the name suggests, it is going to emulate your system. What's the need for emulation? So when you are going to have a data center, the number of servers required is huge. So when you start this implementation, there is no need to have huge servers. What you can do is just use the emulation and carry on with testing stuffs. It will be helping the developers to develop the Swordfish, and then it can be used by testers to test. It can be used as a test vehicle. We'll see how. What I'm going to do is talk about the installation. It will be divided into 3 subsections: emulator Python environment, a little about the emulator, and then we go on to see the setting up of emulator. Python environment, this is the requisite 3.6 Python above should be required. Then it is good to have a virtual environment, but not mandatory. The reason being you might be having other Python running or some applications running. So this will make sure that your emulator is running separately in the environment. This is a list of 10 packages which are to be installed. These are mandatory packages. You might have questions like why Flask? Flask is a micro framework which is used in Python. Then Flask RESTful, Flask HTTP authentication are useful for this emulator. Request, it's a de facto standard for the request framework. In ISO 8601 is for your passing the time zones. Markup safe, this is required for HTML to make sure that HTML is safe, and it helps remove the injection problem that we have. PyTs is again about time zones. It is going to help you implement because we are working in different time zones, so it will take the need of that. It's Dangerous is going to provide that security. It uses the Django signing module, and for JSON web signatures. String generator, as the name implies, it is helpful in generating strings. URL lib3 is again de facto standard for the clients. Now we move on. About the emulator, here I am going to talk about 2 files which are mandatory. So first is emulator config.json. This is going to make sure the default configurations which are already there, you can add more configurations. I'll show how we start the emulator, and then I'll show that it starts on a default port. So you can alter the port. That is a common example, least example that you can make sure you do in your configuration. The next one is resource manager.py. This Python file talks about static resources and dynamic resources. When we talk about static resources, as the name implies, these are the read-only resources. So when we talk about that, example would be chassis, all the physical elements, like you cannot make changes in the drive properties. So that would be an example of a static resource. Now these static resources are already provided in the emulator. The source for this is the mockups folder. It is again available at the GitHub SNIA. For SSM, that is Scalable Storage Management, you can just download the latest mockup folders from there and replace it. We'll talk about how we start and then I'll explain a little about these resources. Dynamic resources are the ones which you can add. As I told, in a data or to reproduce a data center environment, you can keep adding servers and configuration to your system. You can scale up as well as you can scale out. So this is useful there. Now, the basis of Redfish and Swordfish is JSON. So when we talk about JSON, what are we doing? We are making sure that every component in server as well as every component in storage services or storage equipment is represented in JSON format. It will be a JSON file which will represent the entire resource. You can use the Postman utility. The operation, it's there in the documentation how to go about using that to create new dynamic resources. Now here is about the emulator. The steps are like it is an extension of Redfish. So you need to download the DMTF Redfish emulator folder. You need to create a new folder, copy the Redfish emulator resources there. Then you download the Swordfish emulator, copy that, and it will ask you for overwriting. You can go ahead and overwrite those files, and then that's it. You're good to go. You just run like an ordinary Python file, just say Python emulator.py and you're good to go. This is how it will look like. So once you take that Python emulator.py, it starts on your port localhost 5000. So now what do we do with this? So once it starts, you can go on to any browser and you can access and see your resources. Now we'll move on to the demo of the same. So here if you see, there are 3 folders. As I spoke, the first one, Redfish Interface Emulator, has been taken from DMTF, and then I have Swordfish API Emulator. I create a new folder, that is Swordfish. There is nothing in that. I copy the contents of Redfish Interface Emulator into it, and thereafter Swordfish API Emulator. It will ask you to override. The reason, again, it is an extension. So already whatever Redfish provides is there with you. What you do with Swordfish is you copy the storage services and storage systems. That is basically the purpose of this. So once you go do this, we'll move on and see what happens. So see, this is how the folder structure will look like. Now I will open the emulator configuration. So this is how it looks. Mockup folders, as I spoke, it is the Redfish mockup folders that it is taking. And couple of other things like HTTPS is disabled, you can enable this. Now this is an important part. When you talk about resources, you see the storage services, storage systems and systems. These are basically the collections. Now what was the need for that? In SNIA, when you used to work, I don't know how many of you have worked with SNIA, but it is a complicated procedure. You have associations in that. Now here the simplification was done by creating different folders. These folders are nothing but collections. So if you talk about storage services, it will have the collection of all storage services in your system. Storage system will have the collection of all storage systems. The index.json. Now questions can be why the name index.json. If you have worked on HTML, the hello world, the first program that you make is index.html. So from there we've got this index.json. That is how we went on for this. So this is going to talk about all 3 of them as collections. Now we'll move on to one of these resources and see how it works, how it looks like. Now you see these 1, 2, 3, this is how simple it can get. So the first one is the first storage service, the second storage service in the system, and third. And each of them will again have an index.json. We'll open one of them and see the contents. So these again are the collections. So each of the folder is a collection. There can be multiple class of services in this, classes of service. Yeah, so we open this here. So you see the classes of service. So this storage service is one, classes of service. So it's as simple as it can get. So what you need to do to create a new resource, you can have an index.json in each of these folders. That's how it's simple it gets. To scale out or to scale in, you can make the changes here. Even scaling up can be done. So that's the ease that this is offering you. Now we will go ahead and start the emulator. Let's look at resource manager.py before that. Yeah, so this is important file because it talks about where from the resources are taken, the static resources and the dynamic resources. It's a simple Python code. That was the screenshot that I showed. Now we'll open it on browser. This is the root. It shows all the services that are there in the system. Now we'll open one of the service and go through that. Yes, it's possible. We have done that. It is possible. You have to just make some changes in the configuration file. Now I'm going to open one of the resources and go further. This is the storage service. These are storage pools. Now we are going to go to open one resource as the volume resource. You can see the allocated bytes, consumed bytes in the resource. The status of the volume. What is the need for this next one, Swordfish Basic Web Client? We saw that API emulator was developed. It could be used by developers, it could be used by testers. But the problem was we could not see the associations. We could see from one URI to another how to go, but how does it show the whole hierarchy? That was a problem still. So we came up with this Basic Web Client. It shows the entire hierarchy with the browser clicks. That is one advantage. Then we spoke about the dynamic resources. If you remember, through Postman, we can give the GET request or the POST request and we can create or just see the resources. But here, the basic web client will give you add and remove buttons. You can just click and add resources, one click, that's it. So it is that simple. And you can attach more than one service. So this is what talks about it. You can add more than one service and then you can also make changes. And you can make a writable, that is a patch command for each of the property. This is one of the screenshot taken. This is how you add the service. So this is after you start the basic web client. This page you can access through the browser. I have a demo for that. We'll see how we go about doing that. You just go ahead and add one of the services. Once you add the service, you can explore the resources. So here are the resources, the storage services. So if you see in the previous one, API emulator, you could see a link of resources, but you could not see how the hierarchy is. Here you can see the hierarchy. This is about one of the storage services and what it contains. There is one more screenshot that I have. This is for the storage system. So you see the ease of it. Now I will show a demo for the same. About the installation, I did not cover it separately because the installation is just a 3-step procedure. That is it, that's all about it. So there is a commands.bat file which we are going to open now and see the contents. It's only working on NPM, surely Node.js. So what you have are 2 packages that you need to install. We'll be seeing those. So once you run this commands.bat, that is the first part to it. After this commands.bat, you need to do an ng build and you say npm start. So this is the first time you have to do ng build and commands.bat. npm start will start the thing and then we'll see the magic. So here we go. See the content, only Express, Angular, Angular CLI. That's it. That's it there is about this. And then I'll start use the npm start. It started on 3000 port. This is what we saw there. Here I have just added the service, okay, and we are seeing the resources. So here we see 2 classes of service. I'm so sorry. I have really this trouble of handling the mouse here. Yeah. Now do you see this add and remove buttons? This is what I was talking about. This can be used for adding a resource, that is your post operation, and the removing is the delete operation. And do you see that pencil thing in the properties? That means it's an editable property. So you can go away and do this. This corresponds to the patch operation. Okay. Now we'll see the resource. And now if we go forward, we see here the class of service and its details. So there are two classes of service available. You can create a new one, of course. Now we'll move on to one of the resources, the storage services, and the pool in that. So there is already existing one pool. So you see these are the operations, the actions available are the operations on the pools available. And then we'll see the allocated volume, size, and consumed bytes, provision bytes. All this data is important for a storage admin. This is the state. Now we can see the volumes. There are 3 volumes. We can see each of these volumes and we can go ahead and edit the properties the same. So this is similar to any JSON resource. Again, you can do the same in Emulator also. You can go and change the JSON file. That's all you have to do. So the ease is really good. This was the second tool that was developed. The third tool, what was the need for this Swordfish Datadog? Now Datadog and Power BI, as I spoke, I'll be talking about these two tools. These are analytics and monitoring tools. Once we are done with the development thing, or even if we want to present the client as to wherein a client integration was important for analytics and monitoring of your storage services. So for these two tools, we have tried in Swordfish to integrate with these two popular tools. One is Datadog and the other one is Power BI. So now we are going to see how that integration works. So what is the aim of this dashboard integration? First thing is to connect with the Swordfish service. And the second is displaying the storage system capacity information. This is what we are going to achieve in the Datadog integration. What does that mean for us? The functionality would be having a dashboard view, and along with that, what do we want? We have to do a data collection, what we want to actually monitor. And then we go ahead and in the dashboard, we populate it, we monitor it, and then we visualize that data. Steps for Datadog integration. How do we go about integrating with Datadog? Now, for that, first we have to start our service. That could be a service, or you can, to start with the Datadog thing, you can even use the emulator. You just start the emulator, add this as a service, and then continue. Here I have a service which I have integrated with that. It's a storage service. You install the Datadog agent, and then you need to configure the Datadog. You need to create the metrics. Now, these are the custom metrics which we are talking about. In your service, what is it that you need to monitor? Here, it's the storage capacity which we have monitored and seen. Then you just sign into Datadog website, and then you start creating dashboard. What are the options available? We'll discuss about it. What are the options available for creating the dashboard? And then from that, we go ahead and create the graphs. You can even create an alert or events also to monitor your data. So that's the flexibility which this tool gives. This is an agent. If you see the host name here, it has been attached to this agent. So Datadog, how it works is, if the service is running on some, whichever system it is running, there is where you need to install the agent also. And agent will start monitoring. It will start monitoring all the system attributes. You need to make sure, along with the system attributes, you make sure that your Swordfish service attributes are also being monitored. Now, how do we do that? That's the next thing. How do you submit custom application metrics? So when we talk about that, after installing the Datadog agent, whether it has support for both Linux as well as Windows. So when you do that in C program data files, you will see this checks.d and conf.d. So you need to make a file and you need to configure the metrics that you need to monitor. Those will be, it's a YAML file, so you need to make changes there. The file name should be same in both conf.d and checks.d. You restart the agent and you're good to go. It starts monitoring those metrics. Then you need to go to the dashboard, create a dashboard and make sure that whatever you're monitoring is showing up. The visualization of the data should be correct and you can use them for analysis and monitoring. We'll move on to this. This is how a YAML file looks like. If you see the URL, I think it is too small. Okay, this URL is of the storage service root. Whatever is your storage service, you give that root and then you give the metrics name and the place. So, from the root, I have moved on to storage service. From the storage service, I am monitoring this particular volume. So, we move on to this. After you are done with the monitoring, submit the custom metrics, you restart the agent. So, now it started monitoring. Now what? You create a dashboard for viewing or data visualization. These are the two types of dashboards there, available. One is a time board and a screen board. What's the difference between the two? Time board, as the name implies, it works on time based. Here is the graph. So, if you see the graph, the top graph, it is monitoring these three, SP threshold low, high, medium and high. It is monitoring that on the basis of time and the graph is shown above. This is taken from the SNIA documentation. You can have a look at that. So, it monitors on basis of time. If you do not want all your attributes to be monitored on basis of time, we have a screen board. Here, if you see, the alerts and the events are also available. You can configure them after monitoring your custom metrics. This is another, again taken from the SNIA website. So, it monitors your capacity data over a period of time and it shows the graph. Okay, we are done with one of the tool, wherein we have done the analytics and monitoring. There is another powerful tool available, which is from Microsoft, Power BI, Power Business Intelligence. Now, we are going to do an integration. Integration with this tool is further simple. So, here I'll go and show how to do that and then we'll see a video of how we have done it, how I have done it. So, again, the aim of that, connect to a Swordfish service. And then I go ahead and display the storage system capacity information. Here I am going to see in a storage pool, I have couple of volumes. I am going to show the allocated bytes and consumed bytes in each of the volume. Now, this is what is connecting. So, there we had to connect to a service. The steps were different in that tool. We had to go about writing the YAML file, configuring it and stuff. Here, it's fairly simple. In the option drop down, you see a web and you give the URL. Once you give the URL, this particular storage service has authentication. Most of the storage services do have. So, it displays you this port. You go ahead and you write down. So, here is the service root of my storage service. I give that and then it will show me a record. And there I select whatever thing I need to monitor, whatever property I need to monitor, and I go ahead and visualize the data later. This is how my chart would look like. We can go ahead and see this demo, how this chart, bar chart came. So, here this is how a Power BI desktop will look like. I go ahead and add to web. There is no further integration required. You just give the URL of your root or whatever volume resource or storage pool resource. So, here you see this is the volume resource. It's a unique identification for this volume. I go ahead and so this is query based. I give the queries. So, this will create one query. So, it will open a screen like this, wherein I have query and I have full control. I can use transpose on this, I can convert it into tables, and there are a whole lot of things which Power BI provides. It's a very powerful tool, you can explore it. There are custom queries you can create and duplicate. So, there is an advanced editor. If you see that advanced editor in the properties, so you can take one query data, I don't know if it's visible there. After properties, there is advanced editor, you can pick up the query, you can paste it and you can create similar things. Just have to give the resource and change the resource ID, that's it, you're good to go. There are custom queries available wherein you can just record a query and run it over and over again on a different resource. So, there are a lot of things available. Because of the ease of use and the way this tool is commercially available and used, we have done this integration with the Swordfish service. So, you see this is one resource, this is the volume resource which got opened up. the list, record options are given. You just go ahead and open each of the resource. So when you see the record, that means it will show OData ID of this capacity. See, if we go to the capacity record, it will show all the allocated bytes, consumed byte, all that which is available as a record. I'll go to that and then we'll see how it works. You see this data record and you get these 4. Now I'm going to use some of the options available from Power BI on this. So all these steps are also there in documentation, but for the ease we've shown it as a demo so that you can, you're good to go. This is applying the query. This is one resource available. Now we have duplicated this query for 3 different volumes. Now we have 4 different volumes and I am going to create a chart. So in visualization I have chosen the bar chart. So you can do whole lot of things with these things. Just give you an example, it's that simple. The integration is pretty simple. So now it is showing allocated bytes and consumed bytes on a particular volume. We have taken for 4 different volumes in the storage pool. You can create a custom query and use it for each of the storage pools. So in that case, you would know how much data is allocated and how much is remaining bytes in your storage pool. That can be presented in a bar chart. Okay, now we are done with the tools, how the tools work. But what was the idea behind all this, to have this training, to have this learning objective, this workshop? So the whole idea is to know the power available through these tools. So if you see the API emulator and the basic web clients, they can be used as a test vehicle, they can be used by the developers, by the testers. Let's move on to developer and see for a user who's a developer, how can these tools be used? If you talk about API emulator, you can use it to scale up the system, test your system, develop the tool, develop the Swordfish service as a storage service. Basically, a server. You can develop a server which caters to your needs. It can be feeder for analytics and monitoring tools. That is the power of API emulator. Now, for a developer, basic web client, it gives you additional advantage. You can see in the browser the whole hierarchy of the system. You can use the add remove buttons for dynamic resources, all that available at click of a button. Then as an API emulator, you can keep adding in JSON files and you can keep scaling up your system. You can even scale out your system. For a developer, Datadog and Power BI might not be that useful, but you can use it to monitor your system. That Datadog has a good capability of showing alerts, events, so you can set up alert. If something is happening in your system, you can monitor that. Let's move on to the test. So tester can use Swordfish API emulator to test the stuffs to see how an actual system would look like. Again, you can make changes to simulate a data center environment. Basic web client, again, it gives you an ease tool. Scripting is possible in basic web client. You can even use a client software to link with this basic web client and show the whole data on a browser. Datadog can also be used for monitoring, analytics, as I spoke about alerts. Again, the tester can use all these things. We can move on to a storage administrator. For a storage administrator, all these tools are important. Emulator, again, he can use just for testing. He starts with basic web client. He can use this to add more resources to his system and test out. For monitoring and analytics, he can use the Datadog and Power BI to actually know what is the problem in his system. If the storage requirement has boosted up, does he need to deploy new servers? Does he need to buy a new storage from cloud? All that decisions lie with the storage administrator. So you see, this is the way all these tools are getting used. So I would just say that people who have not started using these tools can just get started. That is it I have for this presentation. Thank you. These are some useful links. Any questions? Okay, thank you.